The 5 United Nations Regional Economic Commissions, United Nations Habitat, and United Nations Capital Development Fund since 2020 implement a project titled Building Urban Economic Resilience During and After COVID-19. It is focused on strengthening the capacities of local governments in 16 cities globally to design, implement, and monitor sustainable, resilient, and inclusive COVID-19 economic and financial responses, recovery, and rebuilding plans. This side event, hosted by the government of Albania, is organized by the 5 UN Regional Economic Commissions and the UN Department of Social and Economic Affairs, the partners of the mentioned global project, as well as by the city of Geneva Cities Hub and the University of Geneva, which are our committee's key cooperating partners in our work with cities. This side event is a continuation of the ongoing discussion within the global project on how the United Nations organizations can support most effectively the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and achieving the SDGs. We would like to use this opportunity to discuss and collect ideas how we can accelerate our support to cities to make them more resilient and sustainable. A bit more about this event. This event consists of 2 panels. The first panel, representatives of the 5 UN Regional Economic Commissions and UNCDF will present their work, including guidance documents to promote localization of SDGs and recovery from COVID-19 pandemics. In the second panel, discussion experts will deliberate on how, through cooperation and partnership, the process of the recovery and building the resilience at city level could be accelerated. Dear colleagues, we have, COVID-19 pandemic has given us a lot of lessons. So we learned a lot from these pandemics. Not that we didn't know before, but it raised much more in evidence that rapid transformation of our cities is possible, that behavioral patterns can be adapted, and humans can stand in unprecedented solidarity for a common cause. All the partners involved in this side event, with our policy instruments, tools, norms, and standards that support sustainability efforts, we all stand ready to assist in making the Sustainable Development Goals a reality by supporting a better recovery and efforts to build more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities. And as you can see in my background, I changed it since last year. It is a beautiful logo, in fact, but the reason was not this. The reason is that it's a kind of promise that I have done, that in my everyday life, I have to keep in mind and to dedicate my work to contribute to end poverty and leave no one behind. So with these words, I conclude my opening speech, and I would like to invite the next speaker, Ms. Rina Yusila. She is from Sustainable Development Officer at National Strategies and Capacity Building Branch, Division for Sustainable Development at United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, which is a bit long, but you know it better as DESA. So, Ms. Yusila, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Indeed, first of all, of course, many thanks to the government of Albania for hosting this event, and to UNEC and other UN colleagues for putting all the work to bring this event together. From our side, from DESA's side, we're of course really happy to have this conversation during this high-level political forum on sustainable development that is really seeing a record number of different types of events and discussions on the contributions of local and regional governments to the shared efforts that we're making towards the SDGs. Later today, we will have, for example, for the first time, an official session of the HLPF that addresses both the need to support the local and regional governments in their efforts, and also for the first time the voluntary local reviews. And in our view, it's really the fact that this session has been included in the program. It really reflects the increased focus that the United Nations member states are rightfully giving to cities and regions. And we're delighted to have several city leaders also sharing their views and thoughts during that session. So the COVID-19 pandemic has really, of course, hit all countries around the world. And it is unfortunately clear that our momentum towards attaining the SDGs has slowed down. But against the backdrop of the overall adverse impacts of the pandemic on SDG progress globally, it really has affected in very different ways between countries, but also within countries and regions. And in many cases, the impacts really vary even within cities. And this really underscores the importance of impact assessments at the local and regional levels, so that we could really devise appropriate targeted response and recovery measures. And these types of evidence-based assessments could also help us make the needed adjustments for longer-term sustainability strategies and for recovering better. From our side, we really feel that both the voluntary national reviews and the voluntary local reviews can have an important role to play in assessing the situation that we're in and making these better plans for the recovery. As the Secretariat of the HLPF, we've been extremely happy to see the VLRs picking up pace. For the past year, despite the fact that we've been in the pandemic, we've really seen the growing interest of cities and regions in the VLRs, also through the capacity building workshops that we've been organizing for the partners. We believe that the VLRs really provide a multitude of benefits in their own rights for local level SDG implementation. But they can also really be the missing piece in contributing to a robust overall monitoring and follow-up, and they can really feed into the voluntary national reviews. This is the reason why, for example, the recent update of the Secretary General's voluntary common guidelines for the VNRs also now encourages countries to consider the VLRs as inputs to their process. This year, we've really seen VNRs that provide several practical examples of such collaboration between different levels of government. Last year, we had a few cases of VLRs being reflected in the voluntary national review. But this year, several VNR countries, such as Japan, Malaysia, Norway, Germany, and Mexico, just to name some, have utilized the VLRs in their processes. For the first time, one country, Sweden, for example, submitted 4 voluntary local reviews together with their national VNR report to the UN. The Swedish report rightly notes, just to bring one example, that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how essential the principle of leaving no one behind is for a more socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable recovery. Progress towards achieving that pledge is addressed in the VNR, but also in the 4 VLRs from Stockholm, Malmö, Uppsala, and Helsingborg, in each from a slightly different angle. In their VLR, the city of Stockholm, for example, stresses that the principle of leaving no one behind will in the future guide Stockholm's activities going forward. This is really a powerful promise, but it's also a promise of a partnership between the different levels of government towards this shared goal. We believe that in this way, at their best, aligned VNR and VLR processes can identify connections and new solutions and possibilities for partnerships in areas that perhaps otherwise would go unseen. And we're really looking forward to seeing how countries will utilize this powerful tool going forward, with, of course, the full support from the UN family. So, ladies and gentlemen, investing in inclusive, sustainable cities and human settlements means investing in inclusive, sustainable nations, as we all know, also in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And looking forward to today's discussions, which will provide a number of practical tools and examples on how this can be done in practice. Thank you.
You're on mute, Doris.
Sorry. Thank you, Irina, for the messages that you shared and for putting a lot of emphasis in the need for exchange of experiences between cities in their local reviews, voluntary reviews. And now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Shipra Naraksuri, Chief Urban Practice Branch at Global Solution Division, UN Habitat. Shipra,
thank you, Doris.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Gulnara, UNEC colleagues, other regional commission colleagues for our great partnership and for this event today. This is such an important discussion. I mean, we've just heard from Rina, we've just heard from Doris as well. We have only 9 years till 2030. The pandemic has set us back by several years on several of the goals. It has exposed our structural fragilities. It has deepened them. It has amplified them, as Rina was saying, within cities, between cities and rural areas, across regions, across territories and countries. So the inequalities have been exposed and have been worsened by the pandemic. And yet, at the same time, the pandemic has also shown us why local and regional governments are such frontline actors and have such a critical role in advancing their own development trajectory, but also advancing the global agendas as a whole within and beyond their communities. So this really is very timely. And as we were just saying before the session started, this high-level political forum has an unprecedented focus on localization and on local reviews, both today, as Rina mentioned, but also throughout the next week. So this issue is definitely bubbling right up to the top, which is great, I think, for all of us who work with local and regional governments around the world. I want to take 1 minute to talk about UN Habitat's recent report on cities and pandemics. Towards a more just, green, and healthy future. Just one point out of that report, which I think is important for our discussion today, that the report underscores the importance of establishing a new social contract for collective recovery based on 3 rights-based responses: social protection, housing, and income. And I would argue that these are also the building blocks for long-term resilience of individuals, of communities, of cities, and of countries. So I think we need to keep this in mind as we go further in this conversation around localization, local responses, and the local and national link, because a new social contract of this nature requires that everybody pulls their weight together. So I think that's something that I want to flag. Now, the growth of SDG localization approaches and the VLRs over the last year, almost in parallel to the pandemic response, is, I believe, not accidental. I think it tells us something. It tells us that a vast majority of local and regional governments understand that all these issues are connected, and that we can handle the emergency, provide relief, set the foundations for an inclusive and green recovery, and advance the SDGs at the same time, and very often through the same or very interconnected measures. So they get it. And it's not a coincidence that we have this localization push at the same time as we are recognizing the impacts of the pandemic and working towards a post-pandemic world. Local and regional governments, in our experience, are willing to embrace the SDGs as the guiding framework for this recovery and for a resilient future. They see the importance of improved local data and indicators. They see the importance of inclusive participatory approaches, but they also see themselves as champions, as contributors, as active players in the global ecosystem of advancing SDGs. They're not just limiting themselves to their communities and their cities alone, and this is very important. They're emerging as drivers of the global advancement on the SDGs, on Paris, on the New Urban Agenda, on the Sendai framework, etc. And the voluntary local reviews can help them build a new social contract, the social contract I was talking about before, through a transparent, inclusive engagement with their citizens, through orienting their local budgets and attracting funding for the right things, through transforming local governance and multi-level governance arrangements. Much beyond the issue of reporting alone, really as levers, as instruments, as drivers, as accelerators for a whole new dynamic, both horizontally as well as vertically. UN Habitat's own approach to SDG localization includes the VLRs, but is not limited to the VLRs, I would say. We are developing what is called, we are leading, I wouldn't say we are developing, we're leading the development of what is called the Global Urban Monitoring Framework, which with many partners, including the regional commissions and many, many other partners who've been part of this conversation, which is really a harmonized set of indicators to monitor and report on the SDGs and the new urban agenda at the local level. We hope that this framework and other indices that exist, the KPIs that the ECA has and others, will inform the voluntary local reviews in a systematic fashion, not in a straitjacket, not in a template, but in a systematic fashion. And we hope that these can be combined and form the basis for aligning our plans, our policies, our budgets, our projects, and our investments towards the SDGs, with the SDGs, through what we call the flagship SDG Cities program. So there's really a whole framework of SDG localization, at the center of which is the VLRs. I also want to mention in my last 30 seconds, literally, the Local 2030 Coalition, which is also precisely coming together, bringing the entire UN system together to advance localization, to foster collaboration, to incubate innovation, share solutions, and implement collective strategies to advance the SDGs at the local level. UN Habitat is the secretariat and co-chair of this revamped Local 2030 Coalition, and we share the same goals as everybody else in the room. Literally, we're all just pushing together in the same direction. So there's a lot to do together. To us and to all of us in the room, I think it's clear that the SDGs remain a robust guiding framework to recover from the pandemic and to shape an inclusive, green, and resilient future together. And that localizing the SDGs will be what Rina called the missing piece in terms of the VLRs, but broadly as the accelerator in achieving the global goals. So I hope that you will discuss a bit more in detail today. I know my friend and colleague Esteban will facilitate an excellent first panel and conversation coming up. And we very much look forward to learning from all of you and working together with all of you in driving this agenda forward. Thank you. Doris, I think you're muted still.
Yes, thank you, Shipra, for framing the role of UN Habitat with regard to local reviews, local voluntary reviews, but also with the implementation of the 2030 agenda and SDGs. So now I open the floor for the two panels. First with the first panel, which will be moderated by Mr. Esteban Leon, Head City Resilience Global Program at UN Habitat. So Mr. Leon, I leave you the floor, and to your panel also.
Thank you. Thank you, Doris. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's great to talk after the three of you, and it's great that Shipra spoke before me. So now I'm not going to brainwash you with your Habitat's work, which I must say I'm really happy to see that we weren't so wrong. I mean, during this project implementation, we realized that actually the multi-hazard approach that UN Habitat is taking is correct, is right. It has been productive, as well as the localizing the SDGs that we have been promoting as an agency, as well as the voluntary local reviews that we've been working hardly. It's suddenly we realize now with this COVID-19 that we were in the right path, let's say. That's the positive note. The not so positive note is that, as Shipra said, we have only 9 more years to achieve the SDGs, so we better start working hard on that. Well, it's very interesting because I'm moderating this session that basically we've been working for the last almost 2 years together. So most of the panelists are my good friends and colleagues by now. It's challenging because we have seven panelists and we have only 35 minutes, so I'm not going to talk too much. I will just introduce you. I will show you my yellow card here when you are getting already to the time, and my red card here when you are already on time. so we are going to try to keep it on track. I know you all, and I know you that you can talk very substantively, but quite a lot. So remember, the cards are here. Look at the camera, and I will be watching. So then we have a rich discussion afterwards as well. So let me introduce the first speaker. It's Samidu Ahmed from the Economic Commission for Asia and Pacific. And please, Samidu, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esteban. It's a pleasure to share what we have been doing in the Asia Pacific region in relation to today's topic. I hope everyone can see my screen. So starting off, as we just heard from Shipra, the COVID-19 pandemic has really disrupted the implementation towards many of the SDGs, and in some cases, turned back years of progress. So in Asia and the Pacific, densely populated cities with large proportions of informal settlements have really become hotspots of COVID-19 outbreaks, which threatens to widen and reinforce the existing inequality gap in cities. Now, we believe that the 2030 Agenda is the best framework for bringing stakeholders together to reimagine a better future. And the VLRs can really be a unique tool to foster the SDGs and the COVID-19 recovery link. The VLRs really allow local and subnational governments to listen to the needs of the people and reflect them into local policymaking. It invites self-reflection and allows for a process that is data-driven and can be used to plan for action to achieve the future we want. The COVID-19 recovery process should really seize opportunities to go beyond business as usual and address structural issues that have existed in cities long before the pandemic. And we have seen that the recovery planning processes have many, if not all, features and components of the VLR, such as stakeholder engagement, holistic reviews, and setting out future plans. Now, in 2020, ESCAP, together with the Penang Platform for Sustainable Urbanization, developed a set of common guidelines on how to conduct a VLR. These guidelines build on existing resources and are fully compatible with UNDESA's global guiding elements for VLRs. We have designed it to be simple, straightforward, and as holistic as possible. And it was one of the first knowledge products of its kind, which keeps regional specificities in mind. We are also developing an interactive e-learning portal called the VLR Journey that hosts content that is dynamic and targeted. The VLR Journey also contains useful information on how the different phases of the VLR development process relates to the COVID-19 recovery planning process. And ever since the launch of the guidelines last year, we have been trying to mainstream our work through various platforms and initiatives. For example, together with UNDESA, we organized the VNR VLR Lab as an associate event of the 8th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. More recently, we discussed the VLRs at a special session of the Asia Pacific Mayors Academy. We're also currently piloting the guidelines in several cities from the region and trying to integrate it across our portfolio of work. Now, the guidelines are structured around the key phases of the VLR development process, which are planning and institutionalizing, gathering inputs and data, report writing, and follow-up, as you can see from the slide here. Effective stakeholder engagement, as we know, is really the cornerstone of a successful VLR, and it's referred to in almost all of the sections of the document. There's also a dedicated chapter on how local and subnational governments can integrate the VLR with national review processes, that is the VNR. And we through these guidelines, we really want the readers to get started with their VLR journey, and they can always refer to other existing resources that at times go into more details. To give a very practical example, ESCAP has been working with the city of Subang Jaya in Malaysia to develop their first VLR, as well as the Subang Jaya COVID-19 Recovery and Resilience Building Plan. And in the report as it stands, the City Council, it outlines the steps taken by the City Council to address the COVID-19 pandemic, and also notes how the City Council has learned from the pandemic response and are now rethinking and reevaluating certain processes around annual budgeting and how to prioritize and operationalize specific activities. And besides the regional guidelines, we have also been supporting selected cities develop their recovery planning process with the policy pathways set out in the Future of Asian and Pacific Cities report, which ESCAP developed together with UN Habitat and other partners, and which is complemented by a discussion paper on post-COVID-19 era. There are 4 policy pathways that are listed on the slide, and they basically focus on adoption of inclusive planning processes by cities, resilience strategies that break down governance silos and engage the urban poor, the need for people-centered smart cities, and leveraging urban land value, co-creating innovations with the private sector. That was it. It's a very quick run through the slides there. Feel free to scan the QR code to get a copy of the regional guidelines if you're interested. And with that, I hand back to Esteban. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Excellent timing. Excellent timing. Yeah, I think that it's important, and it's very important to see that that local level is gaining more and more momentum, and this is especially important for us as UN Habitat. Let me pass to the second speaker. Same rules. Juan Valle Robles from the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Juan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Esteban. Let me share my screen. I have some troubles to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me?
We can see a screen, but it's dark.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Esteban. Thank you, colleagues. My presentation is regarding the draft guidelines for the development of voluntary local reviews in the UNEC regions, and my presentation has only 2 slides. The guidelines for the development of voluntary local reviews in the UNEC regions were developed at the request of the UNEC Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management and its 81st session in October 2020. The aim of these guidelines is to support local and regional governments in the UNEC regions in promoting shared value creation for the local communities of cities and rural human settlements. The first slide shows the 7 general principles, and I would like to highlight 4 of them. Promote sustainable development at the local level through the creation of shared value. VLRs should reiterate the importance of value creation for the local community, especially in regard to the most vulnerable groups. Promote a participatory approach. VLRs will be open, inclusive, participatory, and transparent for all people, and will support reporting by all relevant stakeholders. Remain evidence-based approach. The UNEC I2 key performance indicators for the smart sustainability cities are recommended for the analysis of sustainability and smartness of cities and for the preparation of the VLR reports on this analysis. And remain flexible and adaptable in response to COVID-19 emergency recovery plans in regional and local contexts. The guidelines for the voluntary local reviews in the UNEC regions aims to provide guidelines for the step-by-step approach for the development of the VLR reports. The proposed development of the VLR comprises 4 phases. Phase 1, collection of information and data. The KPIs are well coordinated with SDGs and their target indicators. However, some aspects of the city life require additional analysis. Therefore, additional indicators can be used using the plan and play approach when necessary. For instance, the urban economic resilience indicators. Phase 2 consists of a structural assessment of the information and data collected in Phase 1, concerning how SDGs use the information and data provided to formulate recommendations for sustainable development. Phase 3, based on the analysis and recommendation on the city performance assessment. Proposals for concrete projects and activities need to be formulated. While doing that, it's important to develop a clear institutional structure for the development and implementation of recommendations of the VLR. And the phase 4 VLR should devise tangible solutions to address the 2030 agenda. Subnational and local governments are significantly affected by the multidimensional impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The VLR is a framework with a long-term vision to provide local action and specific emergency projects to build back better in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this regard, the financial mechanism is critical. Subregional and local governments need financial and human resources to succeed regarding VLR local action and projects for sustainability development. I will stop here. Thank you, colleagues. Back to you, Esteban.
Thank you, Juan. Really appreciate your timing. Let me go for the next one. Marius from the Economic Commission for Africa. Marius, the floor is yours. Marius, I think you're on mute. We can see your slides, but we can't hear you, Marius. I think this is going to be a silent presentation.
No. I don't know if you can hear me and see my screen. I'm having some severe challenges with connectivity challenges. So with your permission, Chair, I will just switch my camera off.
Perfect. No problem, Marius.
If that's okay. And hopefully this will help. So let me just... Can you hear me well now?
Yes, perfectly fine.
Okay. So I have 4 minutes, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, before I see my red card, to speak to ECA's regional guideline for the voluntary local reviews that aim at scaling the localization of internationally agreed targets in Africa to respond to COVID-19 pandemic and to meet the needs of the decade of action. It is important to note that the guideline was developed after an extensive desk review in collaboration with UN Habitat, of course, and UCLG Africa, and participating localities, namely Accra in Ghana, Yaoundé in Cameroon, Harare in Zimbabwe, Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, and the Ngora district in Uganda, also reviewed the guideline, which was finalized after the organization of an experts group meeting comprising of many participants. So the first chapter of the guideline starts off with the prelims, including the preface, the summary, and introduction. The preface offers a set of guiding principles that and the rationale for undertaking a VLR, as well as the impetus for the Africa regional guideline. So the summary then details the contents of the regional guideline and what users can expect. The introduction delves into the evolution of VLRs globally and in Africa, the why behind the guidelines production, and introduces the users to the 3 suggested phases of the VLR. The second chapter is, of course, the actual template. But why is there a need to Africanize the VLR guideline? And we have identified 6 core reasons. First, this was a request from our member states. Second is to address the contextual specificities of the African region. The third one is to incorporate the regional priorities and commitments, including the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And the fourth one is the need to advance VLR production on the continent and from within the continent. Fifth is the overall need to accelerate the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2063 implementation. And of course, finally, to guide the participatory peer review process, which is central to the suggested VLR process in the region. So colleagues, the template offers guidance on preparing the local reviews. It's very simple and easy to follow. In both the guideline portion and the template, global and local African examples are presented on best practices and lessons learned from other local reviews. So the best practices models of institutionalization, partnerships, and means to finance the VLRs. So this is what the African VLR guideline looks like at a glance, and is comprised of 3 phases. The first one relies heavily on the concept of leaving no one behind, that has been discussed before. And phase 1 involves the preparation, prioritization, visioning, and stakeholder mobilization. The concept of leaving no one behind is particularly crucial in this phase and very unique for the African region, where evidence of highly uneven growth hinders access to basic infrastructure, like, for example, sanitation, water, energy, as well as infrastructure. So the leaving no one behind lens highlights several obstacles for achieving the Agenda 2063 and the SDGs in the region, such as demographic imbalances, data gaps, inequalities and discrimination, geographical location, and others. So the LNOB, the Leaving No One Behind lens, requires an examination of spatial inequalities as well. And in cities, this could refer to the urban poor and those living in informal settlements to better understand the needs of the most vulnerable segments of the society. So phase 2 covers data identification, collection and analysis, and write-up as well as the publication of the VLR. The guideline and template try to inspire a participatory process of data collection, bolstered by partnerships, those that are existing and emerging through the stakeholder mobilization. I got my red card. I just need 1 more minute. So the final section details the monitoring and review processes following the production of a VLR. Establishing structures for monitoring and reporting will ensure effective follow-up and implementation of the SDGs and the Agenda 2063 at the local level. Monitoring local implementation of the SDGs need collection, processing, analysis and dissemination of reliable, timely, accessible, and disaggregated where possible data. So before I conclude, the distinguished guests, let me highlight that each step of the VLR process, a voluntary peer review mechanism is proposed. African VLR peer review will not replicate the African peer review mechanism, nor does it attempt to cover any large governance reviews. So I don't have time for this next slide, Chair. This concludes my presentation. Colleagues, thank you very much for your attention and time.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you. I'm really sorry I have to push so much with the time, but we would like to stick to the timing so we can all have a word here. Let me introduce you to Mr. Kenneth Owusu. It's a pleasure to see that Accra, the city and the Metropolitan Assembly of Accra, Ghana, is present in this meeting. Mr. Kenneth, please, the floor is yours. Hello, Mr. Kenneth, maybe you are on mute. I can see some slides, but I cannot hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thanks a lot for the opportunity to share some perspective on Accra program. Just to complement what Mario said, I mean, Accra was selected as part of the 13 project to analyze the impact of the COVID pandemic on Accra city as part of 16 country effort globally, and some 3 cities in Africa, including Yaoundé and Harare. Accra saw this as a great opportunity for 2 reasons. First was the fact that most of the national effort or in-country effort was on at national level, and we have lost the impact on the local level in terms of revenue losses and some of the resources that is required to focus on the SDG implementation. Secondly, Accra was part of the cities that prepared the first voluntary local reviews in 2019, and there seems to be significant momentum on the implementation of the SDG. However, with the onset of the pandemic, we lost some momentum, both in terms of efforts that we put on the implementation of the SDGs, and also some resources. Resources were prioritized away from most of the SDG-related climate change, greening effort, and things like that to health-related and some recovery, especially in the economic arena. So Accra considered this as an opportunity in terms of repositioning Accra to be able to implement the SDG interventions going forward. Why Accra has become important in this conversation in Ghana, especially because if you do the analysis of the cases, the pandemic, about 55% of the pandemic recorded in this country were in Accra. Accra also has most of the businesses that we have in this country, and therefore the impact of the pandemic on Accra City is going to affect the economy of Ghana significantly. So Accra City is very, very important in the scheme of things when it comes to discussing the impact of the pandemic in Ghana and what interventions is required to be able to recover the economy and place it on a path of resilience. So we started this process in 2020. We work with ECA and other partners to first and foremost agree on the set of tools that is supposed to be used to do the diagnosis analysis, and also commit to collecting data on the indicators that were agreed to be used to assess the impact of the pandemic on Accra. And between November 2020 and April 2021, we had collected the data and also done some draft analysis of what the impact is as the first phase of the program. Now, the second part was to validate the draft report and also proceed to prepare what we call economic and financial resilience plan. And this is what initial assessment of what our diagnostic study has shown, that out of the 17 core areas of assessment, Accra seemed to have shown some modest resilience in about 14 of those areas. And 3 areas seem to have had some significant impact in terms of the pandemic. And just to highlight some of the key issues that has come out with our diagnostic analysis, is the first and foremost, the diagnosis analysis has shown that the informal sector has shown some level of low productivity. There were lack of credit for the informal sector who largely suffered from the pandemic. There were also some weak social protection in the area of, especially the informal sector. They didn't have enough social protection, and therefore the impact of the pandemic was large. And the large population without bank and electronic account, especially in the informal sector. And then we also recognize that Accra City also suffered revenue losses up to about 30%, and therefore required some action that needs to be taken to improve the revenue capacity of Accra. We also recognize that there were some issues of coordination internally in terms of planning and things like that. So the next stage of the process, I have a record, I'm wrapping up. Just wrapping up. So the diagnosis study has been completed. The outstanding work that needs to be done for Accra is to proceed to prepare a recovery plan. And therefore, the recovery plan has started. We had a stakeholder meeting on the 16th and 17th of June, and we have commenced the preparation of the recovery plan. It is expected that the preparation of the recovery plan will feed into the Accra medium-term development plan, which is supposed to be implemented from 2022 to 2025. And Accra really appreciates this effort that has been put in, and it is going to provide the useful information that they require for their medium-term plan, and also to help them mitigate the impact of the pandemic going forward. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Kenneth. Really grateful for your presentation, and it's always great to hear cities and how cities are doing on this, not only on the pandemic and the COVID-19, but also on the achievement of the SDGs, which we are really emphasizing about. Let me pass the floor quickly to Fiona from the Economic Commission for Latin America. Fiona, please, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Esteban, and hello to all colleagues. My internet signal is also terrible today, so if it falls, my apologies. So I think I just wanted to mention a couple of things that we've been working on within ECLAC. We've been working on two fronts, one directly with cities in the context of this project and other projects, well, the project mentioned earlier, and other projects that have been led from ECLAC, principally to identify key areas that when addressed can create larger scale knock-on effects. And on the other front, in developing broader methodologies to support policymakers at all different levels within administrations in evaluating and strengthening their urban policies. So I just wanted to give a couple of examples of the city level. In the case of Guayaquil, for example, we've been supporting local governments. This support has resulted in the identification of the construction sector as being one to have a high potential for triggering economic growth, creation of employment, and fostering sustainability. Within this sphere, housing can play a very important role when we consider that although housing is a minimum level of intervention in the territory, as a whole, it has a great potential for impact if sustainability principles are incorporated into the design and construction processes. And the massive implementation of carbon efficient buildings offers great possibilities to create or strengthen value chains, generate employment, and significantly promote economic activities within the cities. So the aim, what we're looking at in Guayaquil, is the aim is to satisfy the demand for the generation of healthy and resilient urban housing, promoting innovative and scalable practices for affordable and replicable solutions, and supporting local production chains that foster job creation while using sustainable and/or low carbon building materials. Similarly, in our work with Lima, local authorities have also identified a similar area as a key area for intervention, looking at the small and medium enterprises working in the construction sector, which can also play a large role in both promoting recovery from the crisis generated by the pandemic, while also building towards more resilient cities. When we consider the huge housing deficit in the Latin American region, which is above 40% for 2020, satisfying the growing demand will create significant investment opportunities, which, if adequately leveraged, can in turn generate important knock-on effects within the local economies. So identifying key nodes of intervention, such as those that I mentioned for Guayaquil and Lima, is a strategic way to focus efforts and limited resources and generate large-scale effects within the local economies. On a broader scale, ECLAC has been working on two important methodologies, which I'm not sure if you can see my screen just yet. These two methodologies basically focus on supporting. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, yes, we can see.
Okay. So we have the two methodologies. The first methodology is a methodology that aims to support policymakers in identifying gaps in both national and local level policy. It's a step-by-step methodology that leads the user through various steps to be able to address issues of coherence, external coherence of the policy, so how the policy aligns with the international agreements and commitments that have been made, internal coherence to see how within sectors, within different areas of relevance, these policies are coherent. Addressing also pertinence, the degree to which policies respond to issues that question, and whether or not the sufficient resources are allocated to this gap. This methodology leads the user through a process of analyzing different documentation. In some cases, it's one policy. In other cases, it can be a joint mix of different policies and legislation to be able to identify the gaps and then conduct an exercise for ranking these gaps so as to be able to focus efforts on specific areas. The second methodology is a methodology to support policymakers in the generation of integrated policy. So when we talk about integrating policy, we're talking about policy that's integrated both within administrative levels, so from the national right down to the smallest level of the local, and also horizontally between sectors and different areas of interest. So this methodology also supports the user in a step-by-step approach to go through various stages. It can be used jointly with the first methodology that I just mentioned about addressing gaps, where we basically provide a guided method to be able to identify these issues and then present technical to them and various options and strategies to be adopted in addressing them. So these policies, these two methodologies are currently being tested at both national level and local level in various cities and countries in the LAC region. And once this piloting process has been completed, they will be made available for the larger and wider use through our website and whatnot. So the idea is this to be scalable, to be replicated in other cities across the region, and for it to be an instrument of use for anyone who may choose to use it. Thank you very much, Steven.
Thank you, Fiona. That was a marathon. I was having doubt in showing you the cards because we have only 2 women in a panel of 7 people. So the gender balance is a bit weird here. Sukaina, that's our second woman in the panel. You are more than welcome, Sukaina. Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. Sukaina, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Esteban. Thank you. And I take your word for not raising the cards for me then. Hello, everyone. It's always an honor to basically join forces with Habitat on regional commissions and cities who sustainable urban development across the globe and in the region. In my contribution today, we will not basically target VLR guidelines because in the region we still do not have like regional VLR guidelines, and not only this, basically we still do not have a voluntary local review that is officially published by any Arab city. However, I take this opportunity to share that together in partnership with UN Habitat, we will be providing support to Amman, to the city of Amman through the Greater Amman municipality to develop their first VLR, which is anticipated to be the first VLR in the Arab region, and there is potential to support Agadir in Morocco to develop their VLR, and eventually we will be based on this experience and the experiences of others developing the regional VLR. So finger crossed, the next HPF we will be presenting guidelines. Having said so, I'll be sharing with you ESCWA's support to states in relation to combating the COVID-19 pandemic at the urban level. Prior to that, I want to bring in the context of the region by saying that the Arab cities are currently like home for more than 60% of the population, of the Arab population, and statistics show that more than 70 to 75% of the Arab population is going to be residing in urban areas. And this fast urbanization is leading to increased vulnerability in the development system, thus the need to ensure urban resilience, which is the main topic we are discussing today. Now, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic was clearly multidimensional across the globe, and of course in the Arab region, but the context of the Arab region was very particular, because in the Arab region, we suffer from conflict, instability, and this exacerbated the challenges caused countries caught up in armed conflicts, and those countries under instability conditions face deep, long-lasting, particular challenges, which affected their abilities to undertake measures to combat the pandemic, and augmented the challenges basically to maintain urban services, the ability of countries to deploy smart digital solutions and others. So within this context, ESCWA has been supporting its member states for socioeconomic recovery from the pandemic and for the achievement of the SDGs. We've been developing an online tracker, and this online tracker is focused on national social protection measures, and we look as a tool to improve urban policy and planning decisions, and of course in mainstreaming recovery and resilience in policies. So the tool was developed based on a mapping of countries' national social protection measures to mitigate the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. It currently covers more than 160 countries, and the intent or the plan basically expanded to include also measures, and not only those related to COVID-19, so that we improve urban policies in general. Another area where we are supporting the member states Of course, this is what we share currently with UNCDF, Habitat and all regional commissions, which is the focus on this element of, or this angle of building urban economic resilience due to COVID-19. And it's aimed as the opening mentioned, design, implement, and monitor sustainable, resilient, and inclusive COVID-19 economic and financial responses and recovery. We are implementing it in 3 different cities, Arab region, which are Beirut, Alexandria, and Kuwait, and noting the particular context of Beirut, which is suffering from a severe economic crisis, from a deflation in the currency rate, and from the blast that basically augmented by tripled and quadrupled and the impact of COVID-19. I'm not going to go through the details, but there are observations which is important to share that Arab governments basically developed broad-ranging programs at providing economic protections for low-income and marginalized communities. But like one common trend in the region is the lack of community-based engagement and learning. It is important to have central resources and a comprehensible national strategy for coordination of efforts. The role of community and the support led at the local level was core, and it was absent. So this is a main area where we will be, we are and we will be interfering. And cities in the region showed through the data collection through this project a moderate to weak strength economic governance structure and leadership, which is a point of weakness to address for achieving resilience and basically to be able to achieve the SDGs. So there is a need to strengthen the capacity of local government in the region because they're the front line in addressing pandemics. Another aspect where we are also exploring that we're providing support to member states is the adaptation of smart digital solutions for building urban resilience. Globally, the spread of COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in strengthening the use of different types of technologies, especially those related to smart cities and the fourth industrial revolution, to mitigate the harmful consequences of COVID-19. So the use of these smart digital solutions varied between cities based on its economic and financial capabilities and its technological, noting that COVID-19 surfaced the vulnerability of the digital rights equally and in the region. So to address this issue, ESCWA is also developing a mapping, a kind of guidelines on how smart digital solutions and future technologies could be harnessed in the urban context to building urban recovery and resilience, urban recovery and resilience strategic plans in the Arab region. The mapping highlights good practices for adoption by city facing the implication of the crisis, and it looks into, let's say, how to use smart digital solutions for enhancing urban safety and urban inclusion. When I say smart digital solutions, I'm basically referring to sensors, AI-based thermal imaging cameras, robotic 3D printing, blockchain, and drones. Drones were used to spray disinfectant in public areas. Different countries use to deliver goods, but others. So we are working on this mapping, and we are fostering the use of to basically push for the use of new technologies for recovery and for resilience, noting that technology is the mean of implementation for most of the SDGs in the 2030 agenda. I'll end up in here. Thank you for listening, and of course, we're always ready to provide additional information. Thank you, and over to you.
Thanks, Sukaina. It was a joke, the no card.
Well, I benefited from that.
you took the time for all women. That's great. Let me pass to the next one. But if you have, because I don't think we will have time for questions and answers, and I'm really worried about the next panel. I don't want to let them with no time. So please, if you have any questions, just use the chat. Put to who are you directing the question and what your question is, and let's use the chat for that kind of questions and answers session, please. Last but not least, Dimitri, our good friend Dimitri, the senior advisor of the UNCDF. Please, Dimitri, the floor is yours. Over to you, Dimitri.
Thank you so much, Esteban. A pleasure to be with you, colleagues. Allow me to shift the focus of the discussion a little bit and talk about the recovery aspect and the application of various tools for promoting urban recovery after COVID-19. What I'm going to speak about is well known to quite a few people on this call. I will talk about the urban economic resilience diagnostic and planning instrument, which we developed in the context of the UN DESA project under DA13. But hopefully there are some people on this call who don't know about that instrument and they may find it useful. My task is also greatly facilitated by the fact that we've just had the representative of Accra talking about the results of the application of that particular tool. And so we can put it into perspective and to understand better what it implies for the cities that participate in this particular initiative. In line with the UNCDF mandate, we are focusing in particular on the economic and financial aspects of the impact of COVID-19 and consequently the recovery measures that need to be taken by the cities in this context. Together with all our colleagues, all 5 regional commissions, and of course UN Habitat, and many thanks to Esteban and his team who have been so effective in supporting the entire project, we have developed and operationalized the context of urban economic and financial resilience. And the critical feature of this is that we conceptualized it as an action-oriented set of capacities and capabilities that is focusing on 2 major aspects. That is planning for and anticipation of negative shocks, but also the capacities and capabilities to reallocate and mobilize resources. Where there is a link that we observed between voluntary local reviews and this particular approach, we believe that the urban economic resilience angle of view gives this particular systematic approach to analyzing the situation of the city development and the situation of the SDG progress towards the SDGs. So this gives that systematic character to analysis of the SDG picture at the city level, which is often lacking. What we have encountered in one of the cities we are working with, I'm talking about the city of Arua in Uganda, which is also one of the pioneer cities in Africa to come up with its own voluntary local review, is that in many cases, the VLRs lack teeth, so to say. There is no critical analytical approach that would allow to bring different gaps identified in the context of this analysis together and come up with a particular program of action, a particular plan of action. So we hope that analysis of urban economic resilience and urban economic resilience recovery planning may be that angle, that entry point that would allow us to bring different streams of SDG analysis together. So this particular concept that we use for analyzing urban economic resilience is based on 5 big components, including business environment, labor market, local labor market, a local financial environment, economic governance, all of it connected through basic service infrastructure and connectivity. And this approach results in 2 major steps, but also in 2 major products. One is resilience diagnostic per se, which leads to the economic resilience performance report. But this is, of course, not the end in itself. We would like to proceed from there, from the diagnostic of urban economic resilience towards resilience plan, and therefore the final product, which Accra and other cities participating in the Urban Economic Resilience Initiative will produce in the very near future, is the Economic Resilience Building Plan. And this results in a very comprehensive performance approach. You may have seen a presentation of a similar web diagram during the Accra presentation, which allows identification of the strong and weak areas along two dimensions of urban economic resilience. One is the depth of the shock, and the other one is the duration of the recovery period. Both of them matter, and different combinations of performance resilience indicators at the urban level, at the city level, result in different patterns of both the shock absorption capacity and the recovery capacity at the city level. The main users of this particular tool are presented here. It may be used as a baseline for resilience performance of the different components of the city economic and financial systems. Of course, it may be used as a blueprint for strategy development and action planning. It is very useful as a monitoring tool to track the recovery. It may be used by the city as a resource mobilization to argue for additional resources with both the central, regional governments and different development partners. It may be used as an advocacy tool with the central provincial governments for legal and regulatory reform, which we have discovered to be a very important aspect of the city recovery. And eventually, it may also be used as a tool for public awareness raising and mobilization. Thank you so much for your attention. This brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Dimitri. I knew it was going to be a challenge. This was like mission impossible. Seven speakers that have quite a lot of content, and it was quite rich. And I wish we could have more time to discuss some of these presentations, which were excellent. Thank you to my panelists, and apologies to the moderator of the next panel, Professor Spiro. Please, I pass you the floor to you now for your moderation. Thank you very much, and thank you to my panelists, and thank you for everyone for staying there. Bye.
Terrific, Esteban. Thank you very much. It was mission impossible, true, despite your great efforts. And one reason, of course, is when people have 4 minutes, they should avoid slides or use only one slide, but this is for next time. So let's continue with our panel. I just received the message from Gulnara, who says that we can go a little after 3 o'clock. We're independent. We don't have to follow a particular time. So if the participants can stay a little more, that would be great. Let me say at the beginning that here we're dealing with two different animals. One is SDGs at the national level and the local level. As very well said Esteban, they started before COVID. And then we have COVID on top of that. And the two could be seen as independent, except that we see the opportunity to make a better recovery by being sustainable at the same time that we recover from COVID. And this is exactly the challenge. In addition to that, Sukaina introduced another dimension, which was the governments themselves. And this is very well taken, because all these things are happening actually by the governments elected by people, and sometimes they need help as well. So having all these three moving parts, our panel is going to look specifically on how we can address the issues, and how we can address the issues by looking at two different sets of help. One being the academia, and the other one being the organizations of cities, because again, time is against us. We need to act very fast for the SDGs. We need to act even faster for the local reviews, the voluntary local reviews, and even faster for COVID. So time is crucial, and not only for our panel. So I will turn now, I will not follow the order because Matteo informed me that he has to go earlier. So Matteo, if you would like to go first, you represent academia here in our part. You represent the person who is known for data gathering to make decisions. So the question here is, how can we act fast?
Thank you, Spiro. I will be as concise as possible, and it's a pleasure to speak after so many distinguished colleagues and all of this gorgeous content. I want to stress 2 points in my talk. We connect very well with what you have said and what has been said before. The first is data and the point of data, which has been referred to many times also in the previous presentations. And I'm referring to data because one of the things that we need to respond fast is to have a good idea of what is on the ground with the highest granularity as possible. Disaggregated, it has been referenced many times in the previous presentations. But this is not enough. A lot of our focus has been on getting data, right? So getting as much data as possible. And what we have been working with UNCDF at the University of Geneva is one particular research project in which you are also involved, Spiro, and other 6 universities, called Red Hope, which looks at the next level, meaning it looks at how can we help institutions to use this data better, to be better with data. If they don't have it, how to get it in the best possible way, and if they have it, how to avoid bottlenecks that institutions always have. So this would be my first point. To react fast, we need to help institutions nurture data cultures which are good and positive and productive. And this is something that with this research project, we are working at the University of Geneva and this network of universities. The second point that I would like to stress is about training, because COVID-19 has brought really to the foreground, and the SDGs before it, that we really need to keep up with the world and to renew the skill set of public servants in the best possible way. So the other thing that University of Geneva has a long tradition on, and we have been experimenting with UNCDF, especially in the context of building back better from COVID-19, is how to develop training for public servants. Workshops and training that are easy to deploy, localized, referenced very well, so they adhere to the context in which knowledge must be passed. But most importantly, they need to be flexible. This is a problem that academia has, and the UN and cities can help them overcome. The cycles of universities and academia are very slow, whereas what we need is we need to be able to design and deploy training in very short time that addresses questions that cities have now and may change in 6 or 12 or 18 months. Therefore, academia has a lot to learn in this case from the UN and the way the UN has a long tradition in deploying this kind of workshops. And let me conclude by saying that the Centers of Excellence, we just launched the new one at the University of Geneva, are a very good formula in the sense that they can act as buffers and connectors in which supply and demand can meet, and the academia can have its reflections, research, and training reoriented almost in real time, according to the inputs coming from the cities as mediated by the United Nations. And I believe that's a solid way forward to building faster and more accurate responses to crisis. Thank you, Spiro. Back to you.
Thank you, Matteo. And actually, Fiona mentioned the need for speed earlier, and we should definitely take advantage from the UN organizations and also from academia and the city organizations. So let's continue with Antu. Antu, the Geneva Hub, can you tell us what exactly you're doing and how you're going to be a catalyst in addressing both VLRs and COVID at the same time?
Thank you very much, Spiro, and we very much welcome the holding of this panel. So thanks a lot for that. I'll definitely shorten my presentation since we have so little time, but you asked the question about what the Geneva Cities Hub could do, basically. So what we can do is that we can definitely help better connect cities to the tools that the UN is working on. As we've seen in the last decades, basically, the UN and its various entities have increasingly go beyond the national and central level and have started to develop specific tools for cities, and we've heard a few of them in the first panel. So what we can do really is to provide more visibility to the work that the UN is doing and to basically help cities that are looking for this tool to find them, because it can be, I have to say, quite daunting for a city to know which part of the UN system to look at for what services. No, so that's why we, the Geneva Cities Hub, have been set up to help cities better understand, better connect, and find the right interlocutors for what they need, basically, within the multilateral system in Geneva. So that's exactly what we can do as a platform. One of our projects is to develop an online network for mayors and their administration, where they can easily and privately connect so as to share solutions around sustainable energy, climate change, urban transport, inclusive cities, health, you name all the different challenges that the cities have to address. And we hope that this kind of tool will help create a community of mayors who can rely on each other to address local but also global challenges and accelerate the recovery. And I think here one of the central words that has to be kept in mind for cities is really about flexibility. And it was Esteban who mentioned that word in a previous event that we organized with them and other partners. Is really cities have to be flexible in the way they allocate resources so that they can react and recover as quickly as possible. And I'll stop there. I'll be very, very short, Spiro.
Antu, terrific. By the way, the word Geneva is maybe misleading, but that means that you're very centrally located to address your mission. But basically, it's many cities. It's not about Geneva City. I say this because if people look at just the title. And the other thing you mentioned is that some people have told you that although at the national level, the SDGs receive a certain attention, when it goes to the cities, there is a gap. And this is the gap you try to fill. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I've been talking to a friend of mine the other day, a colleague of mine, sorry, and he told me that the missing link was really the translation of global policy making the translation of global policy making at the local level. Interestingly, he was talking about intrapolating in opposition to extrapolating. And he told me that cities indeed often felt far away from global consideration discussed at the UN. So that's also part of the mission of the Geneva Cities Hub, basically, to help that translation, basically, to make sure that what is being discussed at global level, which sometimes sound very abstract to cities, is actually made understandable and matches local and urban challenges.
Terrific, Antu, which gives an excellent introduction to Christian from the Trondheim municipality. Christian, you do similar things and you try to put cities together and you look at different regions, of course, always through the UNICE. So if you can tell us about what you're doing at the Trondheim commune or municipality.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to share amongst these distinguished colleagues as well. So I head the Center for Sustainable Development. It's hosted by the city of Trondheim, but it's a partnership with more than 150 partners now, many of them international. I'll share a couple of images to try to give you an idea about the types of work we're doing. Hopefully you can see some images here. So firstly, we are engaged in advocacy for the local perspective on sustainable development with an emphasis on sustainable value creation. So this is just from the last 4 weeks in Norway, the first national action plan. We are reporting today on the national level as well as the subnational level in conjunction with voluntary local reviews. So a lot of the stuff we do is kind of informing national policies. Most importantly, though, we're developing localized arenas or playgrounds, if you like, for sustainable value creation. So it basically means building a regional infrastructure, working with 20 to 40 cities and local communities at one time, and doing a lot of the stuff that we just heard very importantly underscored by the University of Geneva, the need for data, the need for the tools to manage resources on the ground, but based on evidence about what the potential is at the local level. And this in turn in conjunction with access to resources. So funding, training, and the availability globally of solutions. And this translates into everything from policy documents to methodologies, all the way down to management systems. So individual leaders, and we're working now with 30 to 40,000 leaders in the public sector that need hands-on tools to manage their progress towards the goals. And we're delighted to see the guidelines that Juan nicely presented today, the draft. When we already started incorporating this into the enterprise management systems of cities. So this is kind of an image of this journey from the data, the KPIs, so smart and sustainable cities, through the voluntary local reviews with an emphasis on those 4 phases, and all the way into shadow reports that begin to highlight the more entrepreneurial initiatives linked to creating value on the ground in local communities. And this happens within specific areas identified through the KPI evaluation, using the process that Juan has alluded to, and now beginning to manifest itself in physical changes on the ground, in this case, on energy, for instance. And the next level now is, and this is very much ongoing, not just here in Norway, it's happening in Germany, it's happening, I think the first Jersey digital twin using the same type of approaches on the way. We're working with 8 cities in Ghana, by the way. Many of the solutions that we're showcasing here are actually borrowed from Ghana, which is one of the leading countries when it comes to reporting on progress towards the SDGs. And in fact, many of these ideas are now being translated. And I would like to invite everyone to be part of this learning journey that continues into the Middle East and Africa over the next couple of weeks. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christian, very much. Actually, I have promised to Gulnara we're going to finish 3 minutes earlier. So in the last 1 minute, I would like to thank the entire event and that they gave us the opportunity, and particularly our panel. Now everybody knows how to reach for help, either academia or the cities, and how to address at the same time the VLRs, the GSDs at the local level, and COVID. And as I said earlier, sometimes all these are not compatible. In other words, the time frame, the objectives are not the same, but we must combine the two. This is the only thing that none of us has any doubt that we should approach the two together. So at this point, Gulnara, 3 minutes before the end, and I want you to thank our panelists for being so fast and so precise. I'm turning back to you.
Thank you so much, Spiros. Many thanks to all the speakers and moderators and Doris and Tony for the excellent discussion. As most of you know, it's one of the meetings in a chain of the meetings, and we already have a planning actually through the Forum of Mayors 2022 in Geneva as well, up to the high-level political forum the next year. Yeah, so I would like to maybe give, if there is any comments or questions, and I see that Fiona has raised her hand. Fiona?
Thanks, Gulnara. That was a technical mishap. I'm loaded.
All right. Okay. Well, anyway, so if there is any very short questions or comments from the participants now? seems not. So we would like to finish then in time. We will continue working together with our partners within the project of the building economic resilience during and after COVID-19 pandemic. We will continue working with our colleagues with the Centers of Excellence at the UNEC. This recording will be put under the one of the webinars under the Urban Resilience Org. This is the website of our project. And just to end this meeting, I would like maybe to show some slides about the project itself, which basically also supported this discussion, and within which we will continue working in the future as well. So I will ask Gisas to, again, thank you so much. And probably we would like to end then with a small video presenting the project. Thank you.
The United Nations Secretary General has called for a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The UN socio-economic framework for immediate COVID-19 response emphasizes the need to empower local governments, scale community and city-level resilience. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed the vulnerability of cities, which have become hotspots for the transmission of the virus, but are also amongst the main actors to react to the emergency. The UNDA Rapid Response Project, titled Building Urban Economic Resilience During and After COVID-19, focuses on strengthening the capacities of local governments in 16 cities around the world. This project is a partnership between the 5 regional commissions of Europe, Africa, Western Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Asia and the Pacific, as well as UN Capital Development Fund and UN Habitat. The project is working to design, implement, and monitor sustainable, resilient, and inclusive COVID-19 socioeconomic and financial responses, recovery, and rebuilding plans. UNDA Rapid Response promotes the principle of recovering better by supporting circularity and decarbonization in cities while focusing on overcoming inequalities to aid the most vulnerable in society. The project will contribute to planning for more resilient cities and supporting local government efforts to withstand shocks like the COVID-19 pandemic or other urban system stresses likely to occur in a predominantly urban world. UNDA Rapid Response pursues the following 5 interrelated dimensions of economic and financial resilience of cities: labor market conditions, economic governance, business environment, financial arrangements, and infrastructure and connectivity, with an explicit focus on leveraging digital and technology-based solutions and opportunities within the green economy. Project outcomes will be integrated with and contribute to national and global resilience building efforts. Join us in the efforts to recover better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Thank you.
Everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you.